My definition of freedom, that's a very good question, but to put it in the briefest and simplest, it's to be able to truly be what you are. We're born in cultures, in our case in the 20th century, that predetermine the way that we are going to live. Everything is preset. And yet, what everybody tends to forget, it takes a while for people to wake up, is that this artificial culture that they're born in, I mean, they could easily have been born. There's no reason at all why they wouldn't have been born 3,000, 5,000, 50,000 years ago. And had they been born 50,000 years ago, they would have been in the real natural world with the total freedom that is available. As a natural creature, it is a very dangerous life, of course, but that's freedom. Freedom to be entirely master and victim of your existence. I think it comes to, I mean, if one has to go to the root of this, some people, and I'm one of them, my daughter is another, are not going to be satisfied with substitutes. I mean, I worked for many years as an engineer and I felt uncomfortable. I was successful as an engineer, but it did not satisfy me. I knew there was something wrong. And it took a while. I was lucky in the sense that I had the financial freedom. I managed to earn enough money to pay myself a couple of years sabbatical in the early 80s, and also to have stumbled on this theory that I set in one of my first books, the Orion correlation theory. So these two things together kind of made me take a decision. I remember very, very well taking a conscious decision saying, if I have the possibility to give myself time, I will do what I really want to do. And what I really wanted to do, and I almost felt it was an obligation. It's very strange to explain. I felt it was something that if I didn't do it, my life would have been unfulfilled. I had to bring out this theory, and I did, and I'm glad I did, because I feel I've fulfilled my mission, and it's not just a satisfaction. It is a sense of having reached a point where you. I mean, I'm not finished with my life, but I feel that my mission, my real mission, has been done, and I think everybody has a mission. Sadly, many people do not identify it, or they suppress it. Worse, they don't have the courage to implement it. But if you don't, for most people, they'll live their life in a semi-contented, protected environment, and that suits them. For some people, if they don't do it, they literally destroy themselves. They would literally destroy themselves. So it's an obligation in a sense. I've been very puzzled about what we call coincidence, what we call fate, what we call luck, what we call synchronicity. These are words, and they're words that are used when we cannot possibly explain an event that does not seem to be normal. Things happen in our lives, and our mind refuses to acknowledge them as normal happenings. But because we can't explain them, then we will call them coincidence. And I think everybody knows this, feels this rather. And I've had so many things happen to me that I've come to the conclusion that what we call coincidence, most of the time, is some unidentified law that governs our existence. I call it the law of chaos because it seems so chaotic, and yet occasionally it shows itself. What are the coincidences of not only me coming up with the correlation theory at that time in my life, but at the very, very same time, Rudolf Gantebrink explores the shafts that are a key factor in my theory. At that same time, after 4,500 years, there is a conjunction of two events. And what are the coincidences of us meeting? It's very odd to think about it. In my case, I remain puzzled as to why, of all the generations that have looked at the pyramids, certainly from the 1960s, where it was well known that there was a link between those pyramids and the belt stars of Orion, that had been shown in articles in Egyptology, when it was well known from the pyramid text that there was a link between the king's rituals of rebirth and those particular stars. Why no one noticed this correlation? Why me? And therefore this feeling that there is some sort of totally misunderstood way that your life is being controlled. We like to say synchronicity because we have no idea what it means. But I begin to believe that there is something like that. And things do not happen because they simply happen. There is a very, very complex law that put things together. But it's so complex that it appears to us as chaos. Well, I've always been interested, other than the theories that I developed, in ancient Egyptian history, is that certainly at the early stage of its development. Do you want this? Actually, it does look good. We were doing once, by the way, an interview with Zahi Hawass in a cafe, and a black cat came and jumped on me, and the interviewer says, leave it, leave it. So it looks very good. So we talked with the cat with us, gave it a mood. Yeah. Okay, shall I carry on?
You were talking about how the study of ancient
yes,
teaches
well, what I was going to say is that there is an interface between natural existence and suddenly becoming a social existence. There is a line that can be, now, according to conventional anthropology and archaeology, in Egypt that line appears somewhere around the 4th millennium. There is a kind of prehistory where we have people emerging from hunter-gatherers, from being literally primitive, to becoming more and more complex, and eventually becoming the pharaonic civilization. And therefore, I was very interested in this interface, because they're the nearest thing that we can see as a kind of window into what is natural man. Things were converted from the natural world into a artificial world, like language, like sign writing, like ideas being symbolized by religious ideas and so forth. So that part of it got me very interested. In other words, that the early civilization of Egypt is a social model is a social model that reflects natural man. And that's what to me was very interesting. And it was very beautiful. I mean, uh, with that very early stage of social complex existence, some wonderful things happened. I mean, the art is at its most sublime. They built pyramids. They had wonderful ideologies related to life and the afterlife, and everything about it glitters. And to me, that was a nice model. I do not believe, although it would be very nice, but I do not believe that it is possible to bring man back to his natural state, as Voltaire and Rousseau were advocating, particularly Jean-Jacques Rousseau. But I do believe that we can bring man to a social condition. And that's where Rousseau becomes interesting, that we can have a social contract with nature. In other words, that our social existence is modeled on nature rather than modeled on bizarre religious ideas or bizarre laws that do not suit our nature. So that is, I think, the future of the human race, is to redefine what is human nature and devise a constitution that fits its nature. For example, we have a problem with the American Constitution. The first thing it starts is that all men are created equal. Well, the hard fact is that all men are not created equal. We see this in nature. We see this in human existence. The fact is that there are intelligent people and not intelligent people. There are smart people, not smart people. I agree that we all have the same human rights, but we are not created equal, and therefore to impose a constitution of that kind brings us away from our nature. Democracy is another one. We really need wise men to make wise decisions. If we have a democratic system, which is happening in Egypt, by the way, where we're going to vote in a country that is highly uneducated for that kind of sophisticated system, we're going to have a problem. So I very much believe that the Egyptian model is something to study, because it might show us the way as to what the future is. Yeah, I mean, this year has been a rather unusual year. We're seeing what is loosely called the Arab Spring. Basically what it is, and that is very interesting and needs to be studied. It will be studied for generations. That something brought the Arab world into critical mass. It's like having a magnifying glass trying to light a fire, and you keep it and you keep it and you keep it till that moment comes where it will ignite. Something brought the Arab world there, it's very clear, and literally an ignition. Somebody burned himself. But in reality, that's not it. Although it was the catalyst, if you like. The real event is world communication, the social network. They didn't realize this was happening, but it was. And it kind of linked an idea, like a giant octopus, touching everybody who was in contact with a computer or a mobile phone or with Twitter. And the government didn't see it happening. It's literally sparked. To me, that's very interesting, because we're now, the governments are waking up to the realization that you just can't hide things from people. And what people are waking up to is that they do have a right to the freedom that is natural to them. They've been held down. We've been, I mean, I live in Spain, as you know. Coming here to England, one of the supposedly freest society in the world. When I came here in '67, the great pleasure of freedom of speech. I mean, anybody could take a carton box and go to Hyde Park Corner and say whatever he wanted to say. Well, that freedom is gone. Our freedom we live a very safe life, admittedly. Everybody has their little home and apartment and so forth, but the freedom of speech has gone. You cannot say what you want to say. Freedom of action has gone. And regulations have become so intense that you regulate it to the most extreme thing. So, to me, there is an awakening here. We wanted freedom to be able to express ourselves, but when we do express ourselves, then we're told we don't have that freedom. There is a paradox going on. So to me, there is an awakening, and how it will wake up, whether it's going to be a violent awakening, like it did in the Middle East, or whether the governments will come to realize that you cannot suppress people to that extent. We cannot control people to that extent. We can't tell them what to do all the time. One of the things that is so important in human existence is to take one's life and be responsible for it. I want to be responsible for my own life. I know there is danger out there. I know that it is bad to smoke, but I want to have the freedom to decide. We have created a kind of protection state that is giving us a theoretical freedom, but when we want to practice it, we can't. And so to me, this is the big question that will be resolved perhaps in the next few years, perhaps in the next century. But resolve it we must, because man is born free. And when governments finally recognize this, I love the first phrase in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Social Contract. He starts with, man is born free, but everywhere I see him in chains. Man is born free. He has to be allowed to live his life with the freedom that is natural to him. And that freedom extends very far. The freedom to be able to take his clothes off if he so wishes. To me, that's one of the strange things, by the way. Very often when I bring this point up, people say, oh, you are too rebellious. But it's the most extraordinary thing, that we, as natural creatures, cannot even take our shoes off in a restaurant. You'll be asked to leave the place. This is an incredible paradox in our so-called freedom society. I remember in the 60s when we had the streakers, they wanted to express their total freedom. They want to take their clothes off and walk around the park. No, they were grabbed by the police, put in trucks and taken away. How absurd is this when man is actually born naked and free? I know a lot of people will contest this, but this is freedom. If you want freedom, this is freedom. Well, that's how freedom is unfortunately controlled. We're told, you want that kind of freedom. But if we allow you that kind of freedom, we can't protect you. You got to... I remember, I'll tell you what, because I like to use parables. I, in 1986, decided to immigrate to Australia with my family. And quite frankly, one of the things that attracted me, my family, my sister and my mother were already living there, was that I thought I would be going to a land where there was still a lot of this kind of natural freedom about, open spaces and beaches. And I was stunned when I got there. I got exactly the reverse. I remember very, very well the first week I was there. I actually bought a house straight out, and came to visit me the local council inspector, and I realized, incredible, he demanded that I do silly things like my house was fenced, my garden was fenced properly, and I had a pool. He insisted that we put a secondary fence around, and I said, this is ridiculous, we don't need a second fence. But I had to put it in my own property. I wasn't free in my own garden. There was a branch that I wanted to remove from a tree because it was polluting my swimming pool, and they wouldn't give me permission. And I finally said, well, where is my freedom? If I can't exercise my freedom in my own garden. So I know a lot of people sort of fall for this kind of argument that we're doing it for your own protection. I was capable enough to decide what was dangerous or not dangerous for my children. I didn't need a committee to come and tell me. So this, I'll tell you a very good one that I use as an example. Next door to us, a few houses down, was an old lady who had a cockatoo parrot as a pet. Now, I was living in Sydney at the time. Sydney is literally overwhelmed with these cockatoos. They fly all over the place, like sparrows in Europe. They're nice big white birds that do a very crackling noise. And in the morning, although I enjoyed it, but they do make a lot of noise. Now, that's fine. The free birds are flying, nobody can complain. But she had a pet. And the neighbor complained that her cockatoo was making a lot of noise in the morning. Although there were the others, but hers was a pet. So the council came to inspect, and they actually measured with a machine, with a sound counter, the decibels, and apparently the cockatoo was above the acceptable decibels. And she was given the choice of either getting rid of the cockatoo or facing a court action. She went for the court action. They put her a week in jail with a fine. To me, that was it. I mean, to me, if you can't reason that one out. So I'm puzzled as to how we want to control freedom. You know, we're supposed to be in the free world. You know, in Australia, I couldn't take my kids on the beach without being fined if they didn't wear a hat. Oh yes. They tell me that if my kids do not wear a hat, there is a law that I get fined. I have to decide. I don't need the nanny state to tell me what is good or bad. There is laws that are acceptable, but there are silly laws. But we're coming up with them all the time. Every day there is something new in our free society that impinges on that liberty and freedom that you naturally have. So the future of the human race is to wake up. The future of the human race is to realize that true happiness is living one's life in a state of responsibility and freedom of choice. The choices are being removed. You know, being a writer, I'm very aware that we use language to describe what is, in fact, very complex feelings, and they're not as separate as we think. You know, we say joy, we say happiness, we say fear, we say loyalty, and we have defined them, but in fact, I see them as one unit that responds in different circumstances. In other words, joy is part of fear, and fear is part of joy. They're all they're all a paste in us that responds to given circumstances, which is processed, of course, by our brain. If something good happens to us, the sensation of joy happens. To define happiness is very, very difficult. You get 100 people and you ask them what happiness is, and you'll get some very silly things, like happiness is eating an ice cream, and others happiness is being in love, and then you get the reverse. Some people think that the most awful thing that can happen to you is being in love, for example. So it's very difficult to define. So when we have in a constitution the right to pursue happiness, what do we mean by this if we haven't defined happiness? But let me tell you what I think happiness is and how we misunderstand it. And I will quote or paraphrase the author Colin Wilson, who wrote The Outsider in 1954. Colin is a very good friend of mine. And he once explained to me how the idea of writing his book, The Outsider, came. The Outsider was a response to the very depressive existentialism that was going around in the 1950s in France. He was actually working as a waiter in a cafe in Paris. And in this particular cafe came all these very high-ranking philosophers, writers, Albert Camus, Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, who would come and discuss their very deep philosophies of life, which generally were very depressive. Basically, life had no meaning and so forth. And he was very intrigued, and he wanted to learn from them. And as a waiter, he would go and serve coffee and sort of get a little glimpse as to what they were saying. And he says on one occasion, around the table, they were all in a heated discussion, and one of the ladies, who was apparently a very pretty lady, dropped her spoon, but in the heat of the conversation, she didn't realize she had done this. And so he, while they were talking and ignoring him, went under the table to pick it up. And he describes what he saw. She had her legs crossed, and she was exposing a very pretty foot. She was wearing a pair of sandals, he says, and she had lovely nail polish, and she was wearing an anklet. And when he looked at this, he felt an intense happiness. He felt like he wanted to stay under the table. And he realized something in a flash. It was an epiphany, which led him to write the book, that this is happiness. It can be very simple. The sensation of happiness does not require buying a new car, does not require buying a house. It sometimes can be the touching of a leaf, the feel of the breeze on your face, the warmth of the sun, the taste of fruit. But we are so busy, we are so taken by the complexity of our existence, that when these moments of happiness occur, we ignore them. We seek happiness somewhere else, and we don't find it. And people have very often come and tell me, listen, I've done everything. I bought a house, I got married, I have children, I have a lovely job, and I don't feel happy. So I usually tell them, well, what makes you feel happy? Think, what makes you feel happy? And say, well, I feel happy when I'm sitting in my garden and drinking a coffee. I say, well, why don't you do that then? You know, I mean, that's happiness. You know, happiness is when you, let me try and define it, when your senses make you feel alive, when you feel it's good to be alive, that feeling of saying to yourself, I'm grateful to be alive at that moment. And that's what Colin Wilson felt. And he knew that it's not permanent. You will find these moments, if you allow them to express themselves throughout the day, and you will feel happy. But if you bypass them, you're going to end the day without feeling happy. I wanted to write, I wanted to express these ideas I had related to ancient Egypt and the star religion and so forth. That was an ambition. But it was part of what happened to me. What happened to me was that I began to allow myself more and more I was going to say the pleasure, because it is a pleasure, to allow myself to enjoy moments. You know, nowadays, for example, I'm very aware of this. When I go and have a shower, I don't simply have a shower. I will allow myself to enjoy it. I will take my time, I will feel the water, I will enjoy the soap, I will enjoy the smell. And I realize that by allowing yourself this, in other words, stepping out of this complexity. You know, I have to say something about human existence, because I've written a book called Black Genesis, which has taken me to look at not just prehistory, it's taken me to look at the very origins of modern man, when man literally emerges from his natural state and somehow becomes social. That all that has really happened from that point to now is that our life has become more complex. But now it is so complex, just the mere fact of making a cup of coffee, to early man, to natural man, that would have been an extremely complex thing. To light a flame, to actually have the coffee grinded, it's a very, very complex thing. But we don't realize that this complexity is keeping us away from the way that we should really commune with life and nature. We spend our life in this complexity. Our days are spent in this complexity. Whereas in fact, our true nature demands us to feel and enjoy the context of our surroundings. You know, people go and on the beach, and instead of feeling the sand and feeling the breeze and enjoying the touch of the water, you see them nattering to each other and reading books and listening to music, and they're not allowing themselves to connect with the world that they're in, which is what they're supposed to do. And to me, this is the ironic thing, is that we think that we're extremely sophisticated and evolved. All we've done is that we have made our existence complex. And that's where I have woken up and changed, because I've realized that what I should do is detach myself from this complex existence. I do not suggest that it's possible to do it entirely. You have to survive, you have to pay your bills, fair enough. But to be aware of it, so that occasionally you do step out of that racing train that takes you from waking up to your moment where you go to bed, and step out and allow yourself to be reconnected, if only temporarily, with your natural existence. And sit in a garden, just let your mind. People say it's meditation. I don't go much for meditation. I don't think one should shut ourselves completely. There is a world there. There's birds singing. There is plants. That's our world, and to connect with it is changed me. So in many ways, it's not finding more complex things to do that has changed me. It's actually getting out of this way of living that has changed me. And now I look at the world very, very differently. You know, when I see people rushing about, and I actually feel sorry for them. You know, I feel like saying, but get out of this car and go and lie on the grass a bit. You know.
Okay, nice. Is there anything else you would like to say?
In the same theme.
Whatever.
Yes. Well, I think finally what one has to say is, like my friend Graham Hancock says, you know, is this it? Or is there something beyond our life on this planet? Well, the conclusion is that it's a 50-50. It's either there is or either there isn't. And nobody has come back to confirm it. So, with that in mind, I am acutely aware that I've been born, I exist in an extraordinary place. I mean, it's an amazing adventure that we have here. A planet that is teeming with life and teeming with variety and seas and rivers and mountains and deserts, and it's an incredible gift to be not only on this planet but to be alive and healthy. So if you're alive and healthy, to enjoy this gift, because if you don't, that might be the ultimate sin. The ultimate sin is to ignore this gift and focus on the artificial world, focus on getting more money or buying another house or getting a new car, because that's the sin. There is 13.5 billion years of evolution to produce this amazing jewel that you are existing in, and if you ignore it, you are committed, in my view, the ultimate sin. So to wake up to it and to enjoy it, sometimes not to question it, to embrace the mystery, as many people say, and to and to be grateful. I mean, I'm grateful every day that I have another day. You know, at my age, I think in those terms. And every day that comes is, the first thing I say to whoever is up there or whatever is up there is thanks. I'm grateful to be alive. The gift of life is an extraordinary thing. And the gift of life in a human existence is the most wonderful thing. To throw it away is the ultimate sin. And those who not only throw it away, that they destroy it, are committing the ultimate sin. The word sin to me comes in mind because that's what it's about. An extraordinary gift to be a human existing now, being alive on this planet. It's I don't know if I'm describing it well, but this is, I remember the phrase in the Hermetica where the god Thoth says to Asclepius, "Oh, what a wonderful thing man is. What an extraordinary thing. We are extraordinary things." And if we don't realize it and be grateful for this gift instead of complaining and worrying about our social structure and what we're going to see on television tonight, if we're not aware of this gift, then whoever is going to judge us will say you've committed the ultimate sin. You didn't deserve to be a human.